In recent years, H&M has had multiple pledges in terms of sustainability. And in this video, I actually wanted to see how truthful everything they've been saying is, because it's not something I've actually looked into. It's just something I've heard them say. So we're going to look at the facts and figures and see if any of their claims are actually genuine. So according to the Cambridge Dictionary, greenwashing is behavior or activities that make people believe that a company is doing more to protect the environment than it really is. And some companies, of course, are more guilty of greenwashing than others. But either way, it's kind of difficult conceptually for me to understand how a company can be that for profit and really care about sustainability. There's sort of like two conflicting things going on there. It reminds me of electric cars, because electric cars now are seen as this new sustainable thing compared to petrol cars, but no one really addresses the issues with electric cars, like for example, batteries use a lot of lithium. How much does that affect the environment? I've seen in places like Bolivia, the mining of lithium has actually destroyed a lot of ecology in a lot of places, and also taken a lot of the water supply away from a lot of places. It's dried rivers. So I don't see people actually comparing and contrasting the process of making electric cars versus the process and emissions of petrol cars. It's just people just think it's cleaner because it comes across as cleaner and it sounds cleaner. People don't really look into it very deeply. I think the same thing happens in fashion, where people are just like, oh, it's made with organic cotton, it must be sustainable. It's kind of that negligence when it comes to fashion. And now, of course, as we know, H&M's business model consists of selling cheaper clothing that most people, well, not most people, but a lot of people can afford. And of course, with cheap prices comes other things that have to be cheap for them to be able to make a profit selling at that cheap price. So, for example, cheap labor. They always take the cheapest method in terms of production processes, which most times is the most harmful to the environment. In 2013, something terrible happened. The Rana Plaza collapsed, killing over 1,000 people, with over 2,000 people severely injured. Companies such as Walmart and Primark manufactured products in the plaza. Experts have even come out and publicly stated that the tragedy was completely preventable, which means the only reason it happened was because of negligence by the companies that ran it. Now, despite this and many other tragedies that have occurred at the hand of multiple fast fashion companies, including H&M, studies have shown that workers still work long hours in overheated factories without proper fire exits within the supply chain of H&M, Gap, Walmart, and many other companies. And these facts are even more surprising when you consider that after what happened at the Rana Plaza, H&M actually committed to signing the 2013 accord, which is on the safety of fire and buildings in Bangladesh. And so basically that means that some things that H&M says, you have to take it with a grain of salt. How can they sign an accord, but then experts have done studies showing that they're still very much behind on the accord that they themselves signed in 2013. So that's a bit strange. And now, of course, I won't bash you with all the reasons why fast fashion has been bad for many years. Of course, when people are trying to cut costs, a lot of fast fashion companies have been responsible for, and this is not really H&M specifically, it's just all of them, have been responsible for passing toxic waste from their factories into nearby rivers. Of course, dyeing and dyeing things like denim and things like that is a very heavily water intensive process. Same thing as growing cotton. And a lot of places, a lot of rivers have been dried up completely by these processes. Of course, when you use things like polyester, they lead to a lot of microplastics, and that is what is killing fishes in the sea. It's also why us as people, if you eat fish, you're very liable to eat microplastics that have come from the fish, from the ocean, from polyester and other different things that break up into microplastics. When you wash your clothing, if it's made out of polyester, that actually leads to there being more microplastics in the environment. So it's just the build-up of so many different things. However, the story is not all completely bad. H&M actually, in the past 2 years, has scored very highly on the transparency index, which is an index that really shows how transparent a company is in sort of their business processes and things they're doing. However, it doesn't necessarily make H&M any better or worse. It just means they're very transparent about what they do, which of course is a good thing because it means they're leaving themselves open to scrutiny, which means, of course, they're probably going to improve some things so they don't appear bad. But just openly talking about the bad things you do doesn't necessarily make you better. One of the most commendable things as far as H&M is concerned is concerning their greenhouse emissions, because the greenhouse emissions of their production processes have reduced significantly since 2013. Although they don't deserve an award for that, it's kind of just what they should have done anyway. However, despite that, I was actually really surprised to see the progress that they've made. That was actually quite shocking when I was looking into it. And I'm not going to give them an award, like I said, but it is commendable that they're doing something. The Pearson family that actually owns the H&M Group founded the H&M Foundation, which has a primary focus on funding projects that solve humanitarian and environmental issues. And while I do appreciate financial investment into making things better in general, I do see sort of how they can use this as many different things. One thing being that if you just fund something, you can remove yourself from any responsibility if something goes wrong, or if they do something bad, then you're not really that involved. You're just like, well, I just funded it, I wasn't involved in the process, so it kind of takes you away from any responsibility. But either way, once again, really commendable that they're putting their money where their mouth is and putting a lot of money into improving sustainable processes. Now, despite the good and bad, there are some inconsistencies in what H&M does. Actually, they have a sustainable line, which they call Conscious. They call it H&M Conscious. And this is supposed to be the sustainable line. Very vague, because I'm reading some stats about it now. And when you go on the website and you look at their sustainable line, it says that the pieces are made with recycled cotton and polyester. Now that, once again, like I said earlier, is so vague because there are so many grades of things being recycled, all the way on things being very well recycled to the point where they're actually good quality products to being recycled. Yes, they're recycled, but they're made so badly they're going to disintegrate. And what really is the point? Because when you think of sustainability, it's not just about the clothing itself, it's about everything around it. So if you use all these resources, all this energy, burning all these fossil fuels just to make a sustainable piece of clothing that is not even made to last anyway, then really there's no point of making that in the first place. And doing a lot of research, there is no clear information on how good or what grade or how durable the eco-conscious H&M line is, which means, once again, take it with a grain of salt. But I think the bigger problem, and why I think the eco-conscious line almost delves into the path of greenwashing, it's just the fact that it's just more clothing. And now I have a stat here that says, according to the Fast Company, in 2019, the company was actually sitting on $4.1 billion of unsold clothing. And of course, we all know this clothing has to go somewhere, and it's probably going to end up in landfills or burnt somewhere. And that means that H&M still massively overproduces. So just adding a sustainable line on top of all the overproduction you do is not making the problem any better. And so if I was to give advice to the H&M team, because I know they have sort of a head of sustainability, and I do think they've done a lot of good stuff, but if they want to improve, I think they should scrap that line and really focus on reducing their overproduction, because $4.1 billion of clothing that you're sitting on is crazy. That is so much clothing. Like, I would rather you just reduce your overproduction. I'm sure the amount of fossil fuels and, harm to the environment will completely outweigh this tiny sustainable eco-conscious line that they're making. And once again, we can't even verify how well made the products are. Because ultimately, sustainability is more than just having an eco-conscious line. It's about many different things. It's about how do you dispose of your waste? Do you just throw it in rivers, or do you actually make sure that you're getting rid of your waste safely? It's how efficiently is your energy usage when you're making these things? How much water do you use to dye these products? It's when you're shipping these products, how much fossil fuels are burned? Are there more efficient ways you can ship products that reduce the amount of carbon emissions? Are you making clothing that is actually made to last, which means that less clothing ends up in landfills and people are consuming on average less? And I don't think H&M ticks half of those boxes, which means just adding an eco-conscious line to me doesn't really mean anything, to be honest. And so even though H&M has made many steps forward in the right direction, I think their starting point was so bad that it was very easy for them to make steps. But from where they are now to becoming a significantly more sustainable brand, I think that's left to be seen. But comment down below if you ever think H&M will be at a commendable level of sustainability, and obviously comment down below your reasons for why you think it will be or not. And on that note, if you want to support this channel financially, then you can do so by subscribing to the Patreon. The link to that is in the description below. Just before I go, actually, I just wanted to kind of talk about kind of like my process of making this video, because I used to see all the time H&M as being more sustainable and they're always talking about it. And I wanted to see to what extent is this true. And I think going into it, because a lot of fast fashion brands are known to be quite bad for the environment, going into it, I did have my sort of preconceived notions, but as a journalist, because that's what I study, I know that when it comes to research, I can't think like that, but that was just at the back of my head. And I was actually quite surprised. I thought H&M was way worse than a lot of the research I did when I was really looking at the numbers. And actually, H&M has made huge steps compared to the likes of Zara, for example, or other fast fashion brands. So even though H&M is actually a lot better than a lot of other fast fashion brands, in general, it's still bad. It's just a lot better than places like Zara. And from my research, Zara is still now terrible. It's awful as far as sustainability goes. So yeah, I was quite pleasantly surprised. H&M is less harmful for the environment than I definitely, going into doing research, I definitely thought. So just something interesting I wanted to add. But I think at the end of the day, H&M does not get a pass, because even if they become even more sustainable in the coming years, how are they going to make up for everything they've destroyed, all the rivers they've damaged, all the microplastics they've put into the water? Are they going to start extracting these? Are they going to start putting water in places and rivers that they've dried up? So it's all a toss-up, really. It's a really difficult thing to handle. That being said, I'm not perfect. There's probably some things I do that aren't that sustainable, and probably some things I do that I do, like I don't really buy a lot of clothing, that sort of stuff. That being said, no one's perfect, so don't feel like you're just not allowed to buy from H&M just because I said it's like bad for the environment. I think everyone has their own priorities, and I don't think anyone should be shamed for having different priorities, because at the end of the day, no one's perfect anyway. But on that note, thank you very much for watching this bonus clip, and I'll be back with another video very soon.